I can do that if you want. We had a couple of, didn't have very much, but we had a couple of topics. Let me just see what they were. I just closed that page. One of them was this discussion about, exactly this discussion about recordings. We had a talk last time about how we haven't really been thinking about issues of privacy and stuff, but I understand talked about that at the beginning of the video. Yeah, so I don't know if we need to have a discussion about that. I think what Ionis is doing this time seems obvious to me. Stop the recording, make a separate one, and then we can use it for as long as we need it to write notes and stuff, and then probably delete it after that. What do people think? Oh, let me just mention the other topics before we start the discussion. And then we need to do some follow-up from previous meetings, whatever people can remember, and I'll check the notes. If people have got any quick announcements, and then Jan mentioned that we should probably have a talk about a process for the OSArch logo. And I want to talk a little bit about some social media accounts that I've set up. But what do people think about this business of recording and splitting it up? Does that make sense?
My vote would be to keep these recordings public at all times. I think, having a disclaimer maybe at the beginning that everyone's going to be recorded would be fine, or just maybe it's something to write up. But I think having the opportunity for people in the future to view these is, I think, a great asset, because it makes the group a little more obtainable and throws a little personality into the group. So I think having these recordings is a good idea, personally.
I agree with that too. I mean, being an open source community, it's in keeping with the openness to put whatever recording we make out there. Open source ecology, for example, they have that policy that all their meetings are accessible to everybody. So I don't think it's a problem.
Does anyone disagree with that?
Were there any issues with that last time? Sorry, I wasn't there. So
well, a discussion that came out of the last meeting was one of the people contacted a few of us and talked about that he's really not very comfortable having his voice and his name and his opinions published completely publicly like that. And that's, of course, totally up to that person whether they want to do that or not. But if that's going to make it hard for some people to participate, that would of course be a problem, which we would need to think about.
Yeah, but the issue was also that we let people know, let's say, that it will be recorded. As long as somebody knows it, I think then it is fine. So that was, let's say, that we did not specifically, let's say, state that the meetings would have been recorded. That was,
yeah.
So I agree with that. Being open source, open community, we should actually publish these things as well. That's my opinion.
It doesn't sound like anyone disagrees with that, so I think that's what we'll be doing. And if we have some points on an agenda that do need to be discussed privately, like bank accounts or whatever, then that can just be a separate discussion.
Yeah.
yes.
I will note that that's what we're going to do. 2 separate recordings, and we'll keep them both. I think but we agree that having them separate, it makes sense, right? Because one of them is very internal, and one of them should be on a feed of software-related topics. Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
Cool. So that's that one. If people can just think about quick announcements, then we can get through that pretty quickly in a minute. Follow-up from previous meetings. Let me have a look what we wrote down here. We were going to make some more use. We need some more how-to guides. There's a whole lot of Revit ones. If people feel inspired to look into how to make more guides for doing specific things, There's space for that on the wiki, and if somebody wants help sort of organizing that, just let me know and I'll make sure we find a good way to organize it. But there are a few of us who keep an eye on edits to the wiki, so just jump in, do what you like, and if it looks completely crazy, I'll get hold of you. And then there was looking at visual identity on pages, and that's something that we've moved a lot on since last time. Yes, and there was also talk about having a page more focused on just regular free and open source software for an office environment. And that page has been started and is growing. And if you look at, and you can find that from the top of the AEC software list. There's a link at the top there, which is sort of a general introduction to open source software and general tools like, office packages and stuff like that. We talked a whole lot about education and courses, and there's quite a bit of discussion going on the forum about that. Petru from BIM Voice and Dion Malt from Blender BIM have been doing a series of videos focusing on OpenBIM and IFC. So that's been really good. There's some notes. There's some notes on the wiki in the monthly meetup with some links to different systems we could use at some stage for making more formal coursework. Yeah, what did we have more? There's a list of actions here. Wiki design proposal. We've looked a little bit about that. There was a discussion on how to name pages. I guess I just encourage people to look at the way pages are named on the wiki and see if they make sense. I've been going through renaming a couple of pages just so that you're never in doubt as to what topic they belong to, so that you separate IFC as a subject, for example, from IFC inside Revit, and IFC as part of IFC OpenShell, and IFC as part of an FreeCAD export, and so on and so on. But that's a bit tricky. So if you think it's a bit messy, there's plenty of topics on the forum to bring that up. There's one here, assigning wiki pages to, that's to do with structure. So again, if you think the structure of the wiki is a mess, let's have another talk about that. So I've got, and then there's a point here about, I'm just running through the notes I've got here from last time. They're all on the wiki. We talked about social media. So I've got a Twitter account set up, and I've got a LinkedIn account set up. I'm hoping Ionis can help me with the LinkedIn account a bit. And we've got a YouTube account set up. They're easy to find. There's not much to say about that, but they are set up. And then there was some notes here that would be really good if people can help reach out to academia and find out what institutions are doing something interesting that we can collaborate with. So that was a run through of the notes. Now we remember what happened last time. And you can hear we actually followed up on quite a lot of that stuff, so that's good. None of those things have completely died in the water. Things just take time. So that was that. Follow up from previous meetings. Quick announcements. Who has got some quick announcements?
Sorry.
Well,
I want to talk about the logo, that our deadline is coming up. So if anybody wants to add another design, it would be time to do that. Otherwise, we'll closing that and we'll take a vote. I was wondering how we'll do that exactly. If we'll take just like everybody will take a vote.
Yep, let's come back to that because I want to talk about that as well. Have we got any announcements though? Any other announcements?
Yes, there is in the chat, Arqui Guru mentioned the Twitch sessions on Monday. Every Monday morning, every week, morning for Europe at least. There will be some Twitch sessions with Dion on IFC and BenderBeam.
Yep. They're quite good. They've got quite a lot of people following them. I discovered that Twitch can be a problem for corporate networks. I couldn't get through. Any other short announcements? I'll take a second to show the social media accounts in a minute.
And also I did...
your name is not on the screen, so I don't actually know what your name is.
Sorry?
You, the guy with the nice photograph of an elephant in the background. Your name is not on the screen, so I don't know who you are.
Right. Yeah, I didn't find out how to change it. My name is Jan. I'm the alias Jan F.
Oh, that's you. Right. Cool.
Yeah, exactly.
In terms of voting, I've been trying to crunch the maths a little bit, and because there's quite a few that look a bit like each other, there's a danger of splitting the votes amongst similar styles, so that a popular style will disappear because there's several similar ones. So I was thinking one thing would be good if we can just pare down the number of options there, and if we can't do that, I suggest that we do some rounds of voting.
Yeah.
So like everything that doesn't get at least 10% of the vote drops off, and then you keep doing that until something gets more than 50%.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. So, but if
like
we
could even refine because what I liked last time about the Blim logo, that it kind of got in some point refined a bit in the process of voting, and then it got even better. So maybe if we go to maybe 2 or 3 the best ones, and then just work on them a bit, and then take a vote again or something like that.
Yeah,
I like that.
They sort of go in some quite different directions. We sort of need to choose which of those directions is good, and then it could be good. Yeah. Somebody else, was that you, Ryan, was starting to?
Yeah, I just said that. I thought that was a good idea, is to kind of stage it and allow individuals to vote to create the short list, and then from that short list allow people to tweak the design, whatever. Maybe it's a week or 2 week session. And
Yeah.
So I agree, it's a good idea.
Lots of cool designs though. It's nice. So that was yeah. And then I thought the social media, I wasn't thinking of making a big song and dance about those until we get our final logo, so we've got a clear theming. But I thought it would be good if people who are active in this group go in and follow the accounts. That'd be good. Yeah, that's all. Well, and
are the links posted somewhere? All the social accounts?
No, they're not really, but they're. I'll put them somewhere. I'll drop them into the chat soon. I see Malta's dropping them into the chat.
Okay.
No, he's dropping something else.
I'm seeing the Twitter and LinkedIn. Just I don't know.
Yeah.
Other people just might not know they're out there to follow them.
Yeah. Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube. If you just search for OSArch, it's pretty much the only thing that comes up, apart from some guy who's got an architecture firm called OSArch on Twitter. So you have to choose the one that's got our logo and says OSArch.org. He's put some links in the footer of the website now.
Just to mention here that I also did an organization account in LinkedIn. That is,
you got that up? Cool.
Just posted the link here, so people can follow and stuff. We can have more administrators and stuff.
Okay. Do we need to delete the account that I made, or?
I don't know. Let's decide. Maybe it could be redundant. Yes.
That one, Duncan. It seemed like that one was an individual profile, and I might have got that wrong. It wasn't necessarily.
That's correct.
Okay.
I couldn't work out how to do the other one.
So my vote would be just this. Yeah, stick with a group one versus individual. That's just my vote.
Yeah. What did you say it's called, Ioannis? An organization, or what are they called?
It is kind of a company page. Yes.
A company page. Okay.
Not a group, actually. It's not a group. It's a company page.
And but can a company page like and share things, or can it only announce things?
They can announce and they can comment and like only if they are mentioned. So you cannot, let's say, look in general and like. So no.
So you can't reshare things, for example.
You cannot share things unless you are mentioned. If you are mentioned in a post, then you have access to that post, let's say.
Okay. Well, I'll keep the personal account, but stop using it, just so that it's there, and we'll see if it makes sense to use it. Because one of the things that I thought is good about, I think on LinkedIn at least, it's quite good being able to like and share other people's stories, right? But we'll see how.
The algorithm doesn't like it when you share the stories of others. You don't get so many visualizations. But anyway.
Okay. We want to make it even.
By the way, there should be a way to organize events on LinkedIn as well.
Yes, and this is also possible through this company page. So I also see that we can organize events. So
yeah,
let's see how we can use it.
Yeah, I'll see if I can hide the one that I've got so it disappears, but I won't delete it just yet.
Okay.
We'll give it a little while and see how well it works. Aki Guru says you can. Yeah, we'll have a look. I looked into, so this is just off the top of my head. I've been talking with Dion and a few people. We've been looking at funding, ways of setting up funding. So if does anyone have experience using the groups and teams functions of LiberaPay? So LiberaPay, I don't know if you guys have seen it, but it has some quite interesting functions where you can set yourself up as a group, which is basically just a clearinghouse. So you never get any money yourself, but you have members of your group, and I've probably got the terminology wrong, but you have members of your group who are working on different projects, and in the group they decide who gets what percentage of donations, and people can then go in and donate to OSArch, and then OSArch group has decided we're putting 20% over to FreeCAD and 10% to LibreCAD, and like splitting it up. And that sounds really interesting and quite useful, because it would mean that we don't have to exist as a legal and tax entity, because we're not there. We're just a way for people to send their funds. So that's quite interesting. But it doesn't have a lot of tools built into it. And the other thing I was looking at was Open Collective. Has anybody worked with their tools? So Open Collective seems to be just sort of like a step further up. So you exist as a legal entity under one of these charitable organizations. So you're part of them, and you pay, like with LiberaPay, you pay only bank fees. So if you want the project to survive, you want to also give a little bit of money to the developers of the platform, LiberaPay. Whereas the Open Collective platform, you pay more. I can't remember how much it is, 10%, I think. And they have a whole lot of tools for communicating and budgets and like accounting tools. And people can go in and they can see your goals, and they can see your statements, and they can see what you're trying to do with the money and how it's split up and all that kind of stuff. And that also sounds really interesting. So I'm looking at those, and I can't see any disadvantage in setting something up on LiberaPay, because quite a few people are there already. Like Dion is there, and Yorick is there, and a whole lot of FreeCAD people are there. I don't know if Stephen is there or Andrew, but it's easy for people to set themselves up there. And because there's actually no money involved, I feel like one of us could just set it up And as long as nobody thinks it's a bad idea, then it can just start running and we can start pointing people to it. And when we find a better solution, then we'll start using that.
My only issue with it is that we should make it transparent first how the money will be divided before we start collecting it.
Yeah, I need to look at the tools, but you can, yeah, I'm not sure if you can just click on things and see. I think it's like behind the system that the members of the group decide how it's split up. And that's where the other system would be better.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, because the other one, you have goals and you have targets and you have little groups and subgroups and budgets and all that kind of stuff.
But I have no problem with LibrePay if it's made clear to the donators how it will be split up front before they donate. Like if we say it, if it's not fixed with the platform, but if we just state it, it'll be fine for me.
Yeah, and it's a little bit, because of the way it works, it's also a little bit messy. Like if you have quite a few people and not very many donors, because there are some limits to how they can split the funds. So often what they'll do is 1 week somebody will get the funds and the next week somebody else. So that's the way they sort of get it to balance out. But it's a very cheap platform because all you're paying is your bank fee. So I think it'd be a good idea to set it up. But how to manage the transparency, I'm not quite sure. I agree that's maybe the challenge. But if people don't like it, then of course they shouldn't put any money there. And we can link in the description to a page where we say that for this period of time we've made this agreement with these people. It's just like extra work, is my thinking.
I think the other prerequisite, and it looks like it satisfies it, is that the platform infrastructure should be open source, of course, right? So I know LibrePay, their platform's open source, and so is Open Collective. So
yeah. They're both fantastic projects, and they both solve the issue of what should a small group like ours do when we are nevertheless at the stage of beginning to be interested in looking for funds and people beginning to talk about how they can give us funds that we can distribute. Yeah, I'll keep looking into it and I'll make sure to post on the forum. I was thinking the other day, these types of decisions, we can't really take them in these chats anyway, because lots of people aren't in these chats and it doesn't work for everyone's time zone, but it's a good way of just sort of chatting away.
I think one idea is that you offer multiple options for people who are interested in contributing financially. So there are users who really want to be informed about what they're supporting, which projects they're supporting, and even which developers they want to support. And for that, I think we've started on a donation directory on the wiki, but there's a lot of improvement which needs to be done, and we can use that wiki page as a way for that first group of people who want to donate but want to know very, very easily digest a lot of information about who to donate to, what are the channels available, what are the projects you can support, and when you do donate to them, what are the likely outcomes. Like, for example, if you donate to Yorick, he mostly works on the BIM workbench, so that's what you're supporting. If you donate to Real Thunder and FreeCAD, he mostly works on his fork, which does this type of thing, and so on and so forth. So that's one option for a really well-informed user. And then you have a second option, which is for the people who are not interested in diving into the details and just want to say, look, I kind of like what you guys are doing. I'm not very involved, but just here's some money. You guys work out what to do best with it and run with it. So I guess it's they're not mutually exclusive. We can use both options, and we should always tell people that there are multiple options. Anyway.
Yeah, I think so as well. I mean, if people like Patreon, fine, have an account on Patreon. But then somewhere in our system, we would of course be saying that we recommend and we prefer that you do it this way. That's kind of what you're saying, is it, Molt? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, because if people are already on Patreon and they think that the Libra Pay looks yellow or something, don't like it, well, we'll take their money wherever they've got it. That's fine by me. And then eventually we'll have a way of a structure and a way of actually accepting money ourselves to work on our own organization. But that's not the priority at the moment.
Yeah, the priority in my opinion is definitely trying to work out how to get money to people making the change in AEC. And OSArch right now, we're pretty lean and we don't want to be seen as a overhead or anything. Do people kind of agree that it's a good idea to start looking at ways to raise funds for FOSS development in AEC?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Just thought we'd get the make sure we're all on the same page on that.
Yeah, I think also it'd be great if we in the background can make sure that Dion has got enough money to run the servers and the basic things work in the background, so we don't need to ask for money for that. Yeah, it'd be great.
I actually think there's potential of getting more funding, right? If it's kind of a there's a roadmap on where this funding is potentially going to go or likely to go, is that it'll give organizations more confidence to fund.
Yeah. And I was looking at, like, somebody shared today on LinkedIn, a list of EU projects, BIM-related EU projects for green, like environmental stuff, and the number of zeros is eye-watering. So I think that if we get really good at formulating projects and helping them do some of the paperwork, I don't know about other places, but I know that the EU has got a lot of money and they're always looking to buy the nation states' goodwill by advertising those kind of projects. So getting good at writing. But I was talking to Dion about this the other day. Like in Denmark, charitable organizations, they'll have somebody where like half of their time and half of their wage is spent applying for funding. So when you get it, it's a lot, but it's a lot of paperwork to get it. And that's where we might start getting into the issue of how much time, who's going to spend time doing that. But
one thing I'd like to avoid, well, for this group and just politics in general, is to make sure that the vote on where the funding is going is not weighted relative to the funding amount the organizations put in. That's one thing I'd like to avoid.
Oh, you mean so that the donors don't get too much say, or what?
Correct.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that because, if they want to donate directly to a project, then that's fine, right? They don't need to involve us in it.
Correct. Well, exactly. Correct.
Yeah. Because I know,
that's one. That's just my opinion. I'd like to avoid weighting where this funding is going based on how much funding is given. There, just like you said, there are channels if they want to do that. But for this, it would be nice to avoid that. Just my opinion.
I think that's quite a good thing. I agree with that too. If people do want to wait, then they have the option to donate directly. But if they choose to go through OSArch, that means that they're relying on people who are on the community, on the users. They're not saying, hey, I'm a big corporation, I've got the money, I want you to do this. Because that's a problem that the Linux Foundation has faced when they've received corporate grants, that their activities have been heavily swayed by the donors. And if we provide those two options, option one, you donate directly, you work it out, and option two, you give it to us and then we work it out, that helps remove that sway.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah. There were some organizational decisions to be made along this road. Yeah, and I mean the other thing that I'd really like to do is really push this whole thing of fostering the companies in AEC that are using these tools. Some of the bigger ones, they've got their own developers. How many of those developers are actively contributing to the open source projects? Like at Rumble, we use Revit Rhino inside Revit, but I haven't been able to find anyone who even realizes that it's an open source project that can be contributed to. And that's a firm with, I mean, I haven't asked everybody, it's like 16,000 people, but when I did start asking, I very quickly found out that our contract prohibits you from contributing code to open source projects. So there's like a bit of a hindrance there. Yeah.
I'm curious, how does Blender as a foundation determine how to split up their funds to their developers? Is there just kind of an internal voting system, or does anyone know?
I could guess. I'm pretty sure Ton kind of is the one that kind of figures a lot of that out. But yeah, I don't think that there's a real transparent way that they have that set up. But I could be wrong.
They're employees, correct? So that it'd be different than individuals.
Right. They also offer grants as well for people who aren't employees, to where they basically give them some amount of money to focus on some feature in Blender. But for the most part, yeah, I think most of it's just done on an employee basis.
But they're easier because they're the Blender Foundation who works on Blender. We're the OSArch Foundation who works on nothing and supports everything.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the things that I anticipate being one of the interesting things for us to work out is when we do actually get some money and we do actually get some people coming and saying, you know, we've got 6 million. What do you want to do with it? That we will start having some quite robust discussions internally. So finding out how to organize ourselves to make that kind of decision would be good before then, right?
Yep. I'm excited about looking into distributed governance, and I know like Open Collective looks into that, and there's other platforms. So that's something I'm interested in, to try to keep it as distributed as possible. Of course,
Duncan, I think it brings up a good question, in that if or as Dion just said, if we're not actually doing anything, maybe it's not that we are getting funds and distributing funds. Rather, it is we are, providing the information to people about where we feel like is the most important place for people to be giving funds to. Right? If there's people who are actually doing work, maybe we're just doing white papers or organizational efforts that then show people where to direct their funding to.
Yeah, I had this discussion actually with a former employer, where I sort of pointed out that we were using quite a few open source projects in our workflow. And of course, he immediately was like, well, I don't know where to send the money. So, well, no, that's true. Of course you don't. And we're using lots of different things. Well, is his finance department supposed to sit down and spend their own time deciding how much they should send to different projects? So I think like we've talked about, anyone who's ready to sponsor a specific project and asks us which project it should be, then we can help them make that evaluation based on what's important for them. But I think for some corporates, They just need one place to press a button, and they've got their conscience is clean. They can put our logo on their website. We contribute to the development of open source software in the AEC. Just make it easy for them. This is lots of different ways of doing it, right? And we're gonna end up covering all of them, I think. Yeah. One of the things that we don't talk about very much, although I saw, Dion, you just made a post about it, is the whole DWG LibreCAD thing, where people are frustrated with LibreCAD 2, which is not being developed much. But one of the reasons it's for that is that they're working on LibreCAD 3, but that progress is pretty slow if it's not completely stagnant. And as you asked there, Dion, what do people use 2D CAD for? And my opinion is that while a lot of us might be trying to avoid 2D CAD, a lot of offices still have a lot of 2D CAD. We've got 50 years of building projects that are based in 2D CAD. We need systems that are robust to work with that. I'm just mentioning that because we don't talk about it very often.
That was actually part of a bigger thing where I thought, hey, FreeCAD and Blender is well represented in OSArch, and then Ionis is kind of like the guy who shows Codeaster. But we need to start reaching out and getting more of these products showcased. And I think that the 2D CAD products are just a no-brainer, right? They're the bread and butter of the industry.
Yeah.
Or have been the bread and butter. It's slowly changing.
Well, they'll always be part of integrating existing projects.
That's right. It'll always be there in some form or another. And so I think it's important to increase their visibility, get people talking about it. If people have influence, like I'm fortunate that in my company I've influence over the contractual requirements a bit, so I can actually make suggestions like, actually, let's change the contractual requirement from DWG to DXF. And maybe we should start promoting that, so it's not just talking about IFC, but also talking about DXF. Like, why is everybody still requesting DWGs anyway? I mean, is there really a technical reason why people have to do that? Are we really using that subset of proprietary features that AutoCAD dumps on top that makes DWG not possible? Anyway, it's just a broader discussion, and if LibreCAD is one that is so important but has largely been ignored by, or like it's not actively discussed about in OSArch, we're not talking. Are there others who are also missing out on that we should be talking about more, doing more videos on? Yeah, I don't know. Are there? Do we want to have? I don't think we've actually reached out to those communities. I've recently reached out to LibreCAD and said, hey, what can OSArch do for you? Can we publish latest releases or because they have a visibility problem. Everybody thinks that they're not doing any work, but I think they are doing work, and I just subscribed to their forums, and that was just yesterday, and overnight I got 3 or 4 new posts, and there's activity happening. So maybe OSArch can help them out. We can help them out on posting news articles about their updates, increasing visibility. We can help them out by right now they don't have a way to fund their project. Like if you go to the donate button, they're like, oh, we don't have a way. Oh, okay. Do they want a way? Do they need a way? I don't know.
Yeah.
Just my ramblings as I wake up on a Sunday morning.
Is there anything we've been talking about that anyone kind of fundamentally disagrees with? Because what we're kind of talking about is having lots of options where we don't discourage people, where we don't discourage donations directly to projects, and we're willing to be on whatever platforms people are on to help them find projects. And we also want to have a way of collecting and distributing funds for people who just want to click one place. Yeah,
I think that's a fundamental question of where we headed. Like, if we really want to be just an organizer who keeps the context and keeps the cooperation going, or if we want to go and find a way to do things, to promote one workflow, to build really one system that's really complete. And I think Dion is going in a first way, or prefers the first way, like to just keep the people talking to each other and organize it, and not to focus on building one right way to do things. But
yeah. I think as well,
for me, it would be easier, or I would probably support more the second way of doing things, like to build one central workflow and try to focus on that to really build a functioning, really great way to build these BIM projects, and invest more into that. But I understand why it's not a priority for some people.
the other thing I thought one could do with something like the LibrePay model and other ones is there would be nothing to, like, there are so many small components to this ecosphere of stuff, right? There's nothing to stop us saying, well, if you're mostly interested in architecture, here is a pool of projects that we will distribute funds to who are mostly working on an architectural workflow. But if you're mostly interested in engineering, well, here is a separate pool of projects, maybe with some overlap, right? FreeCAD would be in both of them. But here's a separate pool. So tell us what you want and click on a button, right? There's nothing to stop us doing that as well. If people start saying, "Oh, we'd like to click on that button," but you're sending a lot of money to people who are making pretty renderings, and we just want to know if our steel structure is strong enough. Okay. Yeah. Oh, have you seen that guy who runs, I don't remember his name, yes I do, Yorl, who's got a CAX Linux live distribution. So he's got his own, it's probably Ubuntu based, everything is. He's got his own live Linux distribution packed full of all of the mostly engineering tools that he thinks are good, and he's got a forum, he's got descriptions and links on his website. We should reach out to him as well, but at the moment we should reach out seems to kind of mean that there's three of us who find time to write to somebody. So if anybody wants to put their hand up and say, I'd like to help with outreach, that it would also be really good.
For me, the problem maybe with supporting all these different projects and initiatives is that when I talk to people who have no idea about open source and stuff like this, they ask, okay, so how do I do this? And they just expect for me to give them, show them something really impressive and to show a single way to do things that really work. And if they don't expect to dig through, like try 5 different drawing platforms, try different projects and find what works best for them, they just expect to get a complete solution that kind of works.
Yeah.
But the way to solve that, I mean that's the mentality of most of the industry, right? Where so many products in AEC have been dumbed down because they expect the market to not be very digitally savvy and not look these things up. They want everything to be, easy to click, and open source isn't there yet. And it's a huge problem to tackle, and we don't have the resources for that. We need a lot of developer time, firstly to build the basic features, secondly to focus on UX, and it's a huge amount of work, and I'd love to get a team together, but I don't know how to do it. And that's kind of why, for the moment, I think it's good just to support the existing ecosystem. You already have core developers. In my perspective, the people who do the most for open source are core developers, and so making sure that they can work would have a greater impact than trying to build a new team from scratch. So that's kind of the mentality I'm thinking of right now. But yeah, if you have any ideas of how to tackle this problem, another approach is you say, okay, you do fundraising to introduce new people, or you get lots of mentors for GSOC. If I don't know if that introduces more, or I don't know, or maybe you spend your time writing letters so that all these firms who are benefiting from open source can start giving back. These big firms with in-house development teams, maybe that's the way to do it, because they always have workflow at the front of their minds. But I really don't know the solution here. Other thoughts, proposals?
I have a thought. What about, for example, something like a campaign, a fundraising campaign for something specific to be developed? Something like how they are the platforms that like a Kickstarter or something like that. Maybe.
Oh yeah.
That you define a project. You say, okay, I want to arrive to this, and that, and this is the cost, and I don't know. And then people can buy something. Maybe you will have to think also, I don't know, that somebody that pays something maybe has something back, or other than, let's say, the open source that is for everybody.
We already have some of those, right? The on Headhunter, or what's the platform called, for example? You posted some bugs and then you fixed them and then you just took them away again. But
there's bounty source. Yeah. I think FreakCAD has set up a bounty source account where basically you can say, I want this bug fixed, here's some money to do it, and anybody who fixes it gets the money. But it doesn't seem to be too active. But I don't know. I'm not really on top of what's happening there. But yes, fundraising is, I think, a really good thing to do, because that's what OSArch has. It has a brand, it has an outreach, and it has the time that these developers don't have when they're working on projects, right? You can't expect them to do fundraising as well. So if we can do fundraising on their behalf, that frees them up to do development. And hopefully with that funding, they can hire developers, or they can work on it part-time, like maybe 1 day a week, 2 days a week. But it requires a lot of commitment.
About roadmap you made, any news about Epic Games mega grants?
I haven't heard back. I did update them, like for example when we got the Building Smart Awards, and they said that's great, that will help the proposal internally, but still processing. Sorry, Bass, you want to speak? Bass, you're on mute.
I just posted a link to a crowdfunding campaign for point clouds in QGIS, and so it was specific. They realized, someone realized there was a specific hurdle they were trying to get across around a specific feature that would help bring more people in and create more functionality. And so they created a crowdfunding campaign with a limit on when the funding will run be available and a process for implementing it. And so I think, I really would hope that everybody who's coding would be able to be compensated for their time, if not now, in the future. And I feel like the crowdfunding campaigns are a good way to do that. So it might be a good, if there's a specific hurdle that people are finding in their workflow, like Jan, you were talking about, if you can focus on a specific workflow and find a specific hurdle, then you could potentially do a crowdfunding campaign that would fund that.
Yeah, my impression is that those are some of the tools that are available on the Open Collective platform. That you can have funding goals, and you can have, that seems to be part of the tools they've got. That doesn't mean it couldn't be done on other platforms as well. So yeah, like in terms of LibreCAD, so maybe talking to LibreCAD and saying, how about, do you guys need funding to make a big jump on that project? Because we would love to try and organize to get some funding for you. I mean, that could be good. I'm also aware, though, that we need to make sure that our employers see the benefit of this so that they can pay for our time working on this. There's a limited amount of free time, and my impression is that what's happening in the whole in the GIS community is that there is a general awareness that the GIS community is run with a lot of open source software at its core. So both the big companies and the academics and the government institutions, they all realize that of course that's what our employees are spending time on. So I'm thinking a lot about how much time I spend working on OSArch and how much time I maybe should be spending moving my own organization. Because if my own employer starts to see benefits in this and changes the way the contracts are done and starts up an internal accelerator project for helping their software developers understand what open source software is and how to contribute and have a discussion about what projects, you get the idea, right? Because then instead of talking about making a nice page for a fundraiser, that could help putting a lot of hours, like a lot of developer hours into projects instead. And that's one of the areas where I think it'd be quite interesting to spend some time, and it also it would give me and other people in similar situations a chance to get out and talk to their colleagues. So that's totally what I'm looking at doing at the moment with Rhino inside Revit, finding everybody who's using it and getting them to report back what problems there are, and as soon as I find out about a problem, go to our internal developers and say, hey, have you seen, we've got this problem and it's an open source project, how about you solve that problem?
I think another interesting approach would be for the individuals in this group to go back to their employees and say, hey, I'm part of this group, it seems to be gaining steam, it's a pretty exciting aspect. What do you think about the idea of taking one of our projects and actually trying to funnel it somehow through this group, using the expertise of the individuals in the group and their know-how in the various platforms, and to actually work on a real project, and to kind of demonstrate to the world, whether it's publicly hosted or whatever, that hey, this group of people, they have these tools, they're producing this outcome, this is the conversations that they're having. I think for me that's the most exciting way to demonstrate the viability of this type of approach. It's just and it's an easier sell, I think, to these companies too, right? Because they don't want to take the big step of funding something they don't know where it's going to go, is that they can do this incremental approach where they got a project anyways. There's a lot of smart people in this group. right? And very passionate, dedicated people. And, I think there'd be a lot of potential there.
I had a question that's not really related to this. How well are you guys coordinating the different developments between Archipack, BlenderBIM, and HomeBuilder? Because today we saw another way to do walls and doors and windows. There's a way to do that in BlenderBIM. There's a way to do that in Archipack. I feel like a lot of people ask the same question.
Can we just wait a second with that? Does anybody have some response to Ryan's topic, and then we can come back to that one?
Yeah, I've got a quick one. Maybe to turn all of this into something a bit more practical, Ryan can draft up a short one-page narrative or letter that anybody can just pick up and go as a proposal to their employers or something. That way, we're all speaking the same language. So Ryan, maybe you can start up a thread on that. And as for the previous discussions, which was about can we do fundraising about a very specific proposal, which I think was mentioned by a few people, maybe to take that forward, we can also do we already have a thread in the forum? Maybe we do. But if not, start a new thread and just say, here are a list of 4 proposals I'm thinking of, and let's vote on one proposal we all think is the easiest to catch people's attention and grab funding for and all that type of thing. Does that kind of sound sensible as a way to move forward? I've got to run, so I can't hear the response, but hope that's a good way of turning this discussion into an action.
Sure. I can look into potentially doing that. In general, that's what I'm trying to do with opening design, is just to conduct projects out in the open and trying to use open source software as much as really possible, and still actually not burning my clients' fees, right? That's the fine line. So yeah, I can put something out there, but in general, yes, I do think it would be a good idea for the individuals in this group to approach their employees and say, hey, what do you think?
Sorry for interrupting. Just one last thing, just because I really have to run. One last thing. Sorry, is this being recorded? And will it be published online?
Yes.
Okay, then maybe I'm not allowed to talk about it yet. But one thing that was discussed is the idea for to have like a corporate supporter of OSArch. But a corporate supporter doesn't necessarily mean giving money to FOSS projects, although it can include that. One aspect of being a corporate supporter is that you have to walk the walk. So there'll be some sort of agreement saying if you run a project, you have to use free software somewhere, and there will be some descriptions about that. And you will make it standard in your contracts to try and prefer a free software workflow over a proprietary one. And if you do come across, and what's we can also put, if somebody wants to support it in a company, is that let's say two big companies are both supporting OSArch and they work together on a project and they solve a workflow with free software together. All that stuff has to be returned back to the FOSS organizations. Because these guys, we're always building hacks to and workarounds to proprietary software. But if we just said, look, you guys are already doing that, but instead, why not you build it to open source software and give it back? Anyway, so the idea is to have this set of agreements so that companies, when they support this, know what to do. And over time, if the set of agreements supports everybody working together on FOSS software, that would be as an exit strategy. So for the entire industry to just stop using proprietary stuff. Yeah, like a corporate pledge of sorts. All right, I got to really run, so I won't hear the response to this. I'm just going to hang up now. See you later, guys. Bye.
Cheers.
Bye. But just to answer that question about cooperation between the different extensions and stuff for Blender, they talk a lot to each other. Yeah, so they're always working about, certainly in terms of file and structure, the whole issue of a shared interface is something further down the line. BlenderBIM doesn't really have a structured interface designed for a user at the moment, right? So Yeah, we talked about that the other day. That's sort of after the functions are ready, then we can start talking about, okay, well, what's a good way of having an interface that makes sense, and then you sort of would start working out, well, how do we integrate the different tools into one user interface? And who, I think was it Stephen Leger that was looking at, what are they called, Blender templates? So where you can download I mean, it's not a fork, but it would feel like a fork. Download a version of Blender which has got all of those things pre-installed, and all the stuff you don't need is not there. They've talked about, that's sort of the goal. Yeah. The other thing, Ryan, I was thinking also to what Dan was saying before, how we join all of these different tools together. I'm very interested in the type of workflow where you have a common data environment as the ISO